you're like me, you've probably noticed that the hype around rye whiskey has gotten worse year over year, and the prices have got worse right along with it. But I'm here to tell you that most of those bottles you may be chasing probably are not worth it. If this is your first time here, my name is Corey. I travel a lot, go to distilleries, and work with them on single barrel selections for a nonprofit that I help run. And I'm here to tell you, I see the same thing over and over. People spending big on bottles that don't actually make their drinking experience any better. So today I'm gonna break down 7 swaps where you can skip the overpriced, impossible to find ryes for ones that taste great, won't wreck your wallet, and are actually easy to find. And listen, some of these you might expect, but I promise if you stick around, some of these recommendations will probably surprise you. All right, let's get this kicked off with Willett Family Estate. So this is a bottle I think many of you have seen before, and this is their small batch. So they also have their single barrels. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to talk a little bit about small batch, but I also consider single barrel in the space too, and they range from like 4 to 8 years generally, and then they can go up from there pretty drastically and get really, really expensive and harder to find. But Willett, to me, has almost always been a little bit of a miss. It comes in tasting young in a lot of cases, especially with a small batch. They used to be somewhat difficult to find. Now the small batch is pretty easy. The single barrels are still a little bit difficult to find. And with the single barrels, Willett is the most wildly inconsistent brands that I know. And I believe in the small batch, they're combining their high rye and their low rye mash bills. Generally, they have 2 mash bills primarily for their ryes. And with their single barrels, obviously, they're choosing one or the other for their flavor profile. But I don't necessarily enjoy Willett. I've started with this because it's a pretty well-known brand in the rye space. They can get a little pricey, and I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. So the alternative for me is one that's probably a little bit expected, but that's for a reason. And that's Pikesville, Straight Rye. At 110 proof, 6-year age statement, this Heaven Hill product is just really, really good. It's consistent, it delivers. I think it's a low mash bill, low rye, like barely legal, 51% rye, 39% corn, and 10% malted barley. It is that classic low rye mash bill, but it delivers, at 110 proof, it delivers, yes, some honey, and some oak, but it also has that baking spice and that clove. And I think it's just a really fantastic expression for rye. For me, it's a staple in my bar because it is not only really good neat, it's a really enjoyable pour, but it's one of my favorite things to make cocktails with. At that proof and with the punch of spice combined with it being kind of a bourbon lover's rye, it really delivers and punches through on those cocktails so you can get that flavor from the rye at the end product without kind of drowning it out with whatever you're making, Manhattan, old fashioned, whatever it may be. So for me, Pikesville, Heaven Hill product, 6 years, I think it's $55. $55. It is a quintessential option for me in my bar when it comes to ryes. So I wanted to come out the gate with that one. All right, next one up I'm excited about because it's going to cause some controversy. So that is the Colonel E.H. Taylor Straight Rye. A beautiful, container here too. It's classic, it's well known, and Buffalo Trace knows what they're doing. But it is generally impossible to find. Its secondary prices are not worth it in my opinion, ranging from $150 to $200. It's just good. It's just good rye whiskey. And I'm not willing to hunt for that when there's so much else available. So I'm a pass on this unless it's sitting on the shelf, which I don't think many of you are going to see this sitting on the shelf. And what you may see sitting on the shelf though is this, which is the new Riff Malted Rye 6-year whiskey. And this one I was a little apprehensive about because I'm not necessarily a huge new Riff fan, but I was introduced to this bottle and was pleasantly surprised. It does a really good job of blending, and it doesn't blend, it's just 100% malted rye, but it gives a tiny bit of a single malt expression. And I'm not like a Scotch guy, but rye remains the star. And that's what's cool about it. You get those deep, rich, dark fruit notes, but you get a little bit of that overlay of that malted, malted rye and that kind of single malt flavor profile. So for me, it was interesting and exciting, and it was a pour that I wanted to keep going back to and try again and again. So at the $60 price point and readily available, it's a much more interesting option for me. And I will find myself going for something like this rather than the, hunting for the E.H. Taylor Straight Rye. So out the gate, I know that's going to be a little bit controversial, new Riff against E.H. Taylor, but when you consider the time value proposition of hunting for the Straight Rye from E.H. Taylor, I think new Riff it kind of wins the fight there. So that's my second option, and let me know in the comments if you're able to grab one and try it, or if you've already tried it, what your thoughts are. Okay, here's where things are gonna get a little interesting. I am going to take some big swings here because it's the honest truth for me. Some of these bottles are gonna have a wide variation on price, but it's the honest truth that I would choose one over the other. And we're gonna start out the gate with WhistlePig. And I actually don't have the bottle. Like many of the bottles from here on out, I don't have, because I've either purchased the bottle, finished and shared it, or I had to pour and never purchased the bottle because I just did not think it was worth it. And WhistlePig is in that space, squarely in that space, especially the Boss Hog. At $599, it needs to blow me away. And WhistlePig, Boss Hog, 7, 9, 10, anyone that I've ever had, they were good. They were not $599 good. That is a very, very, very big chunk of your wallet. And I'm just never gonna go back and buy a Boss Hog until something changes. So instead of Boss Hog, I really, really like this right here, which is Middle West Spirits out of Ohio. They are finished in dark pumpernickel rye. Not finished, they use dark pumpernickel rye, which I think is super creative and very unique in the American rye whiskey space. So I had a bunch of samples of these a while back, and each one of them actually was really, really impressive to me. But I continue to go back to the dark pumpernickel rye, and it is exciting, it is different, it is unique, it is available for the most part, and it's not extraordinarily expensive. It's sub $100, and it is supporting a somewhat small but growing distillery in the state of Ohio. And I don't know, if you're gonna look at a $599 bottle of Boss Hog that is finished in some exotic barrels, or something like this that's finished in dark pumpernickel rye that gives you some wild flavors that are exciting and unique, but still stick to the core rye flavor profile that you're looking for, then this delivers way more than Boss Hog, in my opinion. So this is my first big swing. So you're talking $599 to somewhere around $90, $80, $90. So that is quite a drastic change in price, but that's the honest truth. I'd pick this over that every day of the week. All right, now this is gonna be a punch to the gut for me, because honestly, this is one of my favorite pours of all time. It is a bottle in which I truly do enjoy, but when I was honest with myself, it is extraordinarily difficult to find. It is very pricey, even at MSRP, and its secondary price is even worse. So it is Michter's 10-year rye, and let's kind of go at it, because I am going to never hear the end of this. And the people that know me are going to come after me too, because they know that I love Michter's 10 and I love Michter's barrel proof, and I love all Michter's products. So the reason I brought it up is because really the point of this list is to tell you what's available and really good flavor profile for rye whiskeys that you don't have to kill yourself to get. And although I love this bottle, it is right up there with some of the most difficult rye whiskeys to get your hand on. And it sits above $200 at MSRP and higher on secondary. So if this is something that excites you, then I think it's okay to have a swap until maybe this falls in your lap, and then just consider it a gift. So if this isn't falling into your lap, I would replace it with a bottle that is actually, this particular bottle is new, but there's a lot of options here, and that's the Sagamore Spirits 10-year. And this is their reserve series. So this is limited, don't get me wrong, but I found it to be pretty easy to find, and I use it as an example. So I went into the VABC store, it was sitting on the shelf, and if you can't find it, then there are other options from Sagamore. They have tons of single barrels, and even their straight offering for rye whiskey is really good. Sagamore knows what they're doing when it comes to making rye whiskey. They've been doing it for a very long time. And Sagamore 10 is I use it as a kind of an alternative to the 10-year Michters, because there's really not a huge secondary market for it either. So you probably can get your hands on it, and it's going to be much less expensive and much easier to find than the Michter's 10-year. And now we're going to go after the big boys. And so just remember, when we're going after the big boys, that I did this for a reason, right? So you're going to have some of these BTAC collection options, and I'm going to tell you a bottle that you can walk into the store and most likely get your hands on, right? So they're not going to be allocated. If you were going to compare apples to apples, then the BTAC probably would win, but that's not the point of this list. The point of this list is to say that the difference in the time and energy it takes to get that bottle, that BTAC bottle, and what you get back in terms of increase in flavor, I just don't think are there. I think you'll be very surprised at how little the difference is between some of these bottles and the actual bottle that you would have to dedicate and devote a lot of time, energy, and money to get are. It's not as big as you might think. So the first one up, I don't have any of these bottles because I just don't repurchase them. or I've just never purchased because I've had enough pours to know that it's not something that's worth my time or money to get my hands on. So first one out the gate is Sazerac 18. And although I probably would purchase this at MSRP, it is not worth the hunt. It is a 90 proof bourbon that is pretty delicious, but at the secondary prices, it is insane what people are spending on this bottle. I just don't understand it. And I don't judge, I really don't. I just have been around enough people to see the disappointment when they finally get their hands on a BTAC bottle like that and find that it's not that much better than some of the bottles they have on their shelf that they got with little to no effort and for a much lower price point. So my replacement for Saz 18 would be Rare Breed Barrel Proof Rye, which is just a really good pour. It's newer to the scene. I think it came on the scene in 2020. And it has a low rye mash bill similar to Buffalo Trace's rye mash bill at around 51% rye, 39% corn, and 10% barley. It packs a punch, and it has, for me, it's a very, very good representation of a bourbon lover's rye. It balances the oak and the sweetness and the caramel that you get in a bourbon with some of those, not minty, but a little bit more herbal and baking spice notes that you get out of rye. So it's a really good transition for people that are interested in getting to ryes, and you get the barrel proof. You get the punch of proof that can go into cocktails and or just as a really good option to drink neat. So this one I think is a really good alternative, although it is not going to go head to head with Saz. I don't think personally. Saz 18, I think when you take everything into account, it's a really good swap. And it's one that I recommend you make if you're getting stressed out about not being able to get your hands on a Saz 18. That's my first big swing of the day for basically going after the big boys. And this next one will be no different, but I believe it is probably a swap that I would make almost regardless. And that is Thomas H. Handy, which is another BTAC option. It is the high proof rye in the lineup, and it comes at a lower age than Saz 18, but it has a much higher proof, probably around 125 to 130. It's a really decent pour, but it generally comes in, I think it's $100 and some odd dollars. I think they're all around $120 now. Harder to find, not as hard as Saz 18, and the secondary prices aren't as bad. I think they used to be upwards of $800, but they've definitely come down. Some are probably in the $350 to $600 range, I would imagine. And honestly, not even close to worth it. So the next bottle that I would put up against it is one that I almost think beats Thomas H. Handy straight up for me. And so if I actually had the option sometimes to choose one over the other, it would be a difficult choice for me. And that is Peerless Single Barrel Rye Whiskey. Peerless Single Barrel, sorry, it's not in focus. There you go. Peerless Single Barrel Rye Whiskey is just a really good pour. And I think, unfortunately, it goes a little under the radar because it is a little pricey. It sits, I think it used to sit around $99. I think it's around $109. The single barrels can be even a little more. Single barrels meaning that it was an actual pick. Like this one is one of our older picks right here from the Cask Collective. So it can be even a little more expensive because just where they set the MSRP at. But there's a couple things about Peerless that make these rye whiskeys what I believe to be some of the best on the market. It is a sweet mash, meaning that they start over every single time with their mash. It's not a sour mash where they reuse some of the previous mash, which costs time and money. They have to clean out the entire setup and, obviously use all that new grain. It's a slower start. So it's an interesting little option that Peerless does with all of their whiskeys. And I think it has a lot to do with their flavor profile being a little bit richer, sweeter, but their rye, I think it's what they do best. Their rye whiskeys are fantastic. These things come in somewhere around 108, 120 proof, and they're all going to have a variation of flavor. So I don't believe that I've ever had a Peerless single barrel that was identical. For my seventh swap, I would go with the Van Winkle Rye 13 year, which honestly is a really good pour, but at the price point and the time and energy, like most of these, it takes to get your hands on this bottle, it is not worth it. I think it sits at 95 proof and it has a decent to great flavor profile. It has a really good nose, if I'm being honest with you, but nowhere near worth the secondary price in the thousands or high $800-900. And it is really, really difficult to get your hands on. So I would replace it almost always with this bottle right here, which is your Jack Daniel's single barrel rye, which has a fantastic story to it, sitting at like 6 to 7 years. And these things can proof up to like 145 proof. And they get their start really when I learned about Jack Daniel's special limited releases with their first limited edition rye that came out, I believe it's in 2020. And someone shared it with me and I was blown away. And I think I put Jack Daniel's on the limited edition map for most people with that release, their rye release. And from there, they've delivered time and time again. And the cool part about what Jack Daniel's has done is they've continued to deliver a lot of these limited releases at really good prices. I remember when I picked up the Jack Daniel's Coy Hill release, and it was still like 60 some odd dollars at 145 proof. And to take it a step further, people got really excited about their single barrel ryes at barrel proof entry or barrel proof, and they decided to make it a shelfer. And that's what you have here. It sits at 70% rye, 18% corn, and like 12% barley. I probably got my math wrong there. I honestly think this is my top rye right now. It is not exciting for a lot of people because it sits on the shelf regularly. But I think that's actually what makes it the most exciting for me, is it's something that I never have to think about. It's always sitting there waiting. I don't have to stock up on it. It's going to be available, and each bottle offers something a little unique and different. And I'm really, really excited when I get to crack my new bottle and see what this bottle is going to be, because it always delivers a well-balanced and flavorful pour that I am excited to not only drink, but to share. So that is going to be probably my top go-to single barrel, not single barrel, but that's my top go-to rye right now. That and Peerless, and then I dabble in and out with all of the other bottles that I've shared tonight, as they offer kind of a unique expression, and they're just really, really good pours in my opinion. So yeah, rye whiskey doesn't have to mean overpriced unicorns, and you don't have to spend an exorbitant amount of time and energy to get some really good ryes onto your shelf and able to drink and share with friends and family. So hopefully you have some options to move forward. If you've been on the fence about getting into rye, this also serves as a fantastic list to get started, to understand the different flavor profiles from the 95.5 flavor profiles, which is the classic MGP high rye. You have some 100%, we had the new Riff 100% malted rye, then down to the 70% rye from Jack Daniel's, all the way down to the low, barely legal ryes, which were a good portion of the ryes. And those lower proof, or those lower rye mash bills, 51% mash bill options, are kind of a bourbon lover's entry point into rye, in my opinion. You're gonna have some really good options to make that transition a little bit easier for you if you're a little bit uncomfortable or just don't really enjoy some of the stronger herbal dill notes that come through on some of the 95.5 MGP rye. So that's kind of where I would start if you're new to rye and just kind of exploring the space. But with that, let me know in the comments if I missed anything, or if there's some other options that are new to the scene that I haven't maybe thought about. Go ahead and put them in the comments. I think everyone would appreciate that. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll see you on the next one.